She slipped into the room with quiet grace, a tray of coffee balanced in her hands, blonde hair neatly tied back her face bare of makeup, her uniform simple yet pristine. What could someone like you know about strategy? One executive sneered, his words sparking dismissive chuckles from the others who saw her as merely a server. But moments later, the room fell silent, their smugness shattered by disbelief. Emma Collins, the woman they scorned, was no waitress. She was the majority stakeholder, the new owner of the restaurant chain they thought they controlled. Where are you reading from? Share below. Your story may be closer than you imagine. In a sleek, high-rise conference room perched above Manhattan's Upper West Side, the air thrummed with the quiet confidence of power floor-to-ceiling windows framed a dazzling view of the city's jagged skyline, where sunlight glinted off of glass towers, and the distant Hudson River shimmered like molten silver. Inside, the atmosphere was no less charged. Executives from Harrington Ventures, clad in tailored suits, with the sheen of bespoke craftsmanship, gathered around a polished mahogany table. Rolexes gleamed on their wrists, catching the light as they gestured with the casual arrogance of men accustomed to bending the world to their will. Their laughter, sharp and self-assured, punctuated the room, mingling with the faint clink of crystal water glasses and the hum of anticipation. Today, they were poised to seal the acquisition of Casa Lumiere, a prestigious restaurant group whose Michelin-starred venues had long been the jewel of New York's culinary crown. The deal was a triumph, a testament to their dominance in a city where power was currency. Amid this tableau of ambition, Emma Collins entered, a figure so unassuming she seemed to slip through the room like a shadow. At 28, she moved with a quiet grace, her simple blue dress peeking out from beneath a crisp white apron, her white sneakers whispering against the hardwood floor. In her hand, she carried a tray of espresso, the porcelain cups steaming faintly as she set them down with practiced precision. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and her eyes, sharp hazel and observant, betrayed nothing as they flickered across the room. To the men at the table, she was invisible, a fleeting presence whose purpose began and ended with their comfort. Blake Harrington, the heir to the Harrington Empire, lounged in his chair, his posture radiating the smug entitlement of someone who had never known a door that wouldn't open for him. His suit, a deep charcoal cut to perfection, was as much a statement as the dismissive grin curling his lips. As Emma placed an espresso before him, he tilted his head, his voice dripping with condescension. "Make sure mine has oat milk, sweetheart. That's about the only thing you are qualified to handle." The words landed like a barb, and the room erupted in laughter, a chorus of amusement that echoed off the glass walls. Heads turned, eyes glinted with shared mirth, and for a moment the executives reveled in the easy cruelty of the jab. Emma's lips curved into a faint smile, a gesture so subtle it might have been mistaken for deference. She said nothing, only nodded and stepped back, her sneakers silent as she retreated to the edge of the room. The meeting pressed on, a symphony of corporate bravado. Numbers were thrown around, millions in valuations, projections of profit margins, timelines for expansion. Papers shuffled, pens scratched, and the executives leaned forward, their voices rising with the fervor of men who believed they were carving their names into the city's history. Blake, ever the showman, punctuated the discussion with quips that drew laughter, his charisma a polished weapon. Yet beneath the surface there was a tension, a faint undercurrent of unease. The deal, for all its promise, hinged on the approval of the principal investor, a figure whose identity had been shrouded in careful ambiguity. Whispers had circulated for weeks, speculation about a shadowy titan of finance, a reclusive billionaire, or perhaps a foreign conglomerate. The uncertainty gnawed at them, though they masked it with bravado. As the firm's lead counsel, a silver-haired man with the gravitas of decades in the game, rose to speak, the room fell silent. His voice, measured and authoritative, carried the weight of finality. "Gentlemen, the principal investor has arrived." All eyes turned to the door, expectant, hungry for the reveal. The heavy oak swung open and Emma Collins stepped inside. Gone was the tray, the apron, the quiet deference. In their place was a presence that seemed to shift the very air in the room. Her blue dress, modest yet impeccably tailored, now seemed less an afterthought and more a deliberate choice, a understated armor. Her posture was erect, her gaze steady, and when she spoke, her voice was clear, resonant, and unyielding. "My name is Emma Collins," she said, her words slicing through the stunned silence, "and I am the lead investor in Collins Equity. As of this morning, we have finalized the acquisition of the entire Casa Lumiere portfolio, effective immediately." The room froze. The executives, men who had spent their careers mastering the art of composure, sat, motionless. Their faces a gallery of shock, disbelief, and dawning recognition. The girl with the coffee, the one they had dismissed, mocked, reduced to a punchline, now stood before them as the architect of their future. Blake's grin vanished, his jaw tightening as he stared at her, his mind racing to reconcile the woman before him with the figure he had so casually belittled. The others fared no better. Eyes darted, searching her face for traces of the server they thought they knew, as if they could will her back into the role they had assigned her. But Emma was no longer theirs to define. She was a force, a mind that had outmaneuvered them all, and the weight of that truth settled over the room like a storm cloud. For Emma, this moment was not a surprise, but a culmination. Years of relentless work of navigating a world that underestimated her at every turn had led her here. She had built Collins Equity from the ground up, her intellect and tenacity forging a firm that rivaled the titans of Manhattan. She had learned early that power was not always loud, that it could be quiet, surgical, and devastating. While others flaunted their wealth, she had moved in the shadows, her ambition, a fire that burned without fanfare. The acquisition of Casa Lumiere was not just a business move. It was a statement, a reclamation of every moment she had been overlooked, every assumption that had sought to diminish her. As she stood there, the executive's shock gave way to a scrambling deference. Hands reached for pens, throats cleared, and voices stumbled over themselves to offer congratulations to align with the new reality. Blake, for his part, managed a tight smile, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease, a recognition that he had miscalculated in a way that could not be undone. Emma met his gaze, her expression calm but unyielding, a silent acknowledgement of the power that now lay in her hands. She did not gloat. She did not need to. The room was hers, not because she demanded it, but because she had earned it. In that moment, the city outside seemed to pause, its relentless pulse slowing as if to bear witness. Emma Collins, once invisible, was now indelible. She was not just the woman who had outwitted a room of titans. She was a reminder that power, true power, did not always announce itself. It could walk softly in white sneakers, carrying a tray of espresso, and still reshape the world. The executives would leave that room changed, their laughter replaced by a quiet awe, their assumptions shattered by the woman who had turned their game on its head. And Emma, with the city at her feet, would move forward, her eyes already fixed on the next horizon, her heart steady with the knowledge that she had always been enough. In the rolling hills of rural Pennsylvania, where fields stretched wide under endless skies and the air carried the faint sweetness of hay, Emma Collins came of age in a world shaped by quiet resilience, raised by a single mother who poured her heart into double shifts at a family diner. Emma learned early that life was a balance of grace and grit. Her mother, with hands worn from scrubbing plates and a smile that never wavered, was her first teacher. She showed Emma how to carry hardship with dignity, how to find strength without raising her voice, and how to keep moving forward when the world seemed determined to hold you back, while other children dreamed of far-off cities or glittering titles. Emma's ambitions took root in the pages of finance books she borrowed from the local library. Between pouring coffee for truckers and wiping down sticky counters, she devoured texts on economics, investments, and markets, her mind alight with possibilities that felt both distant and achingly close. Emma's hunger for knowledge was not born of a desire for wealth or status, but from a quiet conviction that understanding the world's systems could unlock a different kind of freedom. She saw how her mother's dreams of working somewhere beautiful, somewhere like Casa Lumiere, the legendary restaurant group whose name evoked elegance and warmth, were tethered to a life of endless labor. Emma vowed to rewrite that story not just for her mother, but for every person whose worth was measured by the hours they could endure. After graduating with honors in economics from a state university, her diploma earned through scholarships and late-night study sessions, she slipped into the world of private equity with the same unassuming determination that had always defined her. At a mid-sized firm in Philadelphia, she worked in the shadows, her sharp mind and meticulous strategies, building a track record that turned heads, though she never sought the spotlight. Her colleagues chased promotions and corner offices. Emma chased precision, her investments yielding returns that spoke louder than any boast. For years, she kept her eye on Casa Lumiere, not as a financial opportunity, but as a symbol. The restaurant group, with its constellation of Michelin-starred venues, had once been a beacon of culinary artistry, a place where creativity and care converged. Her mother had spoken of it with a wistful reverence, as if its gleaming dining rooms were a world apart from the diner's chipped formica counters. But by the time Emma was charting her own path, Casa Lumiere was faltering. Poor leadership had bled its spirit dry. and whispers of mistreated staff chefs, servers, and dishwashers ground down by arrogance and neglect reached her ears. The news stirred something deep within her. Not just anger, but a resolve to restore what had been lost. This was not about profit. It was about dignity, about honoring the labor of those who, like her mother, poured their lives into feeding others. Emma saw her moment not to save a business, but to rebuild a legacy for every person who had been overlooked. To do so, she would need to understand Casa Lumiere from the inside, not its balance sheets, but its soul. So Emma did what no one expected. She went undercover. With a resume scrubbed of her accomplishments, she took a job as a server, trading her tailored blazers for a simple apron and white sneakers. She moved through the restaurant's bustling dining rooms, her hazel eyes sharp and watchful, taking mental notes as she carried trays and refilled water glasses. She observed the managers who barked orders, the chefs who wilted under pressure, the servers who hid their exhaustion behind practiced smiles. She saw the cracks in the operation scheduling, chaos, unpaid overtime, favoritism that rewarded loyalty over talent. But more than that, she saw the people, their resilience, their quiet pride, their unspoken dreams. Each night after her shift, she returned to her modest apartment and transcribed her observations not as a critique of service, but as a study of character. She was testing the heart of Casa Lumiere, measuring the gap between what it was and what it could be. Emma's time on the floor was both a homecoming and a revelation. The rhythm of service, balancing plates, reading, guests, navigating the chaos of a dinner. Rush felt like an echo of her childhood at the diner. Yet it also sharpened her purpose. She listened to her co-workers' stories, a line cook saving for his daughter's college, a hostess studying for her GED, a bartender who dreamed of opening his own place. Their voices fueled her, reminding her why she had set out on this path. Meanwhile, at Collins Equity, the firm she had quietly built from the ground up, her team was laying the groundwork for the acquisition. Emma had spent years cultivating relationships, securing capital, and honing a strategy that would make her bid for Casa Lumiere unassailable. She moved with the precision of a chess master, each step deliberate, each sacrifice calculated. To the world, she was just another server. To those who knew her, she was a force rewriting the rules of power. When the moment came, it was not with fanfare, but with the quiet certainty of someone who had always known her worth. In that Manhattan conference room, surrounded by executives who had laughed at her, Emma shed her apron and stepped into her truth. The acquisition of Casa Lumiere was not just a triumph of strategy, it was a reclamation of every moment she and her mother had been underestimated, every dream dismissed as too big for their small-town lives. As she announced her role as the lead investor, the room's stunned silence was a mirror to the world she had always navigated, one that saw her as less until she proved it wrong. But Emma did not linger in their shock. Her focus was already shifting to the work ahead. Restructuring Casa Lumiere not for profit, but for its people. She envisioned fair wages, transparent management, and a culture that celebrated the labor of every hand that touched a plate. In the days that followed, Emma walked the dining rooms of Casa Lumiere not as a server, but as the woman who had given it new life. She met with staff, listened to their ideas, and promised a future where their work would be seen. The executives from that conference room would carry the memory of her, a lesson in the danger of underestimating the quiet ones. But for Emma, the victory was not in their humbled glances or the headlines that would soon herald her name. It was in the knowledge that somewhere in a small Pennsylvania diner, her mother would hear of this and know that her daughter had built something lasting. Emma had not just acquired a restaurant group. She had honored a legacy of resilience, proving that power could be kind, that ambition could serve, and that a girl from the fields of Pennsylvania could change the world one quiet step at a time. High above the ceaseless pulse of Manhattan, in a conference room where ambition hung as thick as the city's summer air, Emma Collins stood at the helm of a moment she had crafted with years of quiet resolve. The glass walls framed a skyline that seemed to bow to her presence, the jagged towers of the Upper West Side catching the late afternoon light like a crown. Moments earlier, she had revealed herself as the lead investor of Collins Equity, the architect behind the acquisition of Casa Lumiere, the storied restaurant group now firmly in her grasp. The executives of Harrington Ventures, their polished suits and Rolexes suddenly diminished, sat in stunned silence, their earlier laughter replaced by the weight of their miscalculation. Blake Harrington, the heir whose smug quip had once cut through the room, stared at her, his dismissive grin long gone. Emma, in her simple blue dress, her hazel eyes steady and unyielding, held the room not with force, but with the undeniable gravity of someone who had earned her place. She stepped forward, her voice clear and deliberate, each word a stone laid in the foundation of a new vision. From now on, she said, employee voices matter. The people who serve your tables, who cook your meals, who clean your plates, they are the heart of Casa Lumiere. No one who looks down on them will have a place in this company. Her words were not a proclamation, but a promise rooted in the memory of her mother's weary hands, the diner shifts that had shaped her, and the countless workers whose dignity she had vowed to restore. The executives shifted in their seats, their faces a mix of unease and grudging respect, as if they could sense the ground shifting beneath them. Emma's plan for restructuring was not just a business strategy, it was a reckoning, a redefinition of what power could mean in a world too often ruled by arrogance. Blake Harrington, his composure fraying at the edges, leaned forward, his voice strained with the effort to reclaim control. Emma, Miss Collins, he began the formality, a clumsy attempt to rewrite the past hour. We didn't realize you were involved. I'd be happy to continue negotiations, perhaps revisit our roles in leadership. His words hung in the air, a desperate bid to salvage his standing, to erase the memory of his earlier condescension. The room turned to Emma, waiting for her response. The silence taut with anticipation. She met his gaze, her expression calm but piercing, and for a long beat, she let him feel the weight of his own words. The man who had called her sweetheart, who had mocked her as she served his coffee, now sat exposed, his authority unraveling before her. You made your view of me perfectly clear, Mr. Harrington, she said at last, her voice steady, each syllable measured. I just believe in putting actions behind words. This company no longer fits your values or mine. The words landed like a quiet thunderclap, final and unassailable. There was no malice in her tone, no need for theatrics. Her strength lay in her clarity and the certainty that she was building something greater than the empire Blake had inherited. The other executives averted their eyes, some scribbling notes. Others staring at the table as if they could distance themselves from the moment. But Emma's gaze never wavered. She was not here to settle scores. She was here to set a standard, to carve out a future where respect was not a privilege, but a foundation. In the weeks that followed, Casa Lumiere underwent a transformation that rippled far beyond its dining rooms. Emma's reform initiative placed workers at the center of decision-making, a radical departure from the top-down hierarchies that had once choked the company's spirit. Servers, chefs, and dishwashers were invited to share their insights, their voices shaping everything from schedules to menu design. Wages rose over time was paid, and managers were trained to listen rather than command. The changes were not cosmetic. They were a reimagining of what a restaurant could be, a place where every person from the host at the door to the cook at the stove was seen and valued. The industry took notice, with trade publications heralding Casa Lumiere's rebirth as a model for the future. Customers, too, felt the difference, returning to dining rooms that hummed with a renewed warmth, as if the food itself carried the pride of those who prepared it. Emma, for her part, remained a quiet force. Publicly, she shunned the spotlight, declining interviews and letting the results speak for themselves. Privately, she was relentless, working late into the night, reviewing reports, meeting with staff, and refining her vision. She walked the restaurant's floors, not as the untouchable investor, but as someone who knew the weight of a tray, the burn of a rushed shift, the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. Her presence was a reminder that leadership was not about standing above others, but beside them. Listened to a bartender's ideas for a new cocktail, nodded as a dishwasher suggested a better workflow, and sat with a server who shared her fears about making ends meet. Each conversation fueled her grounding, her ambition in the lives she was working to uplift. Her silence was not weakness, but a choice, a reflection of the lessons she had learned in rural Pennsylvania, where her mother's steady hands had taught her that true strength needed no fanfare. Emma never raised her voice, never needed to. Her actions, deliberate, principled, and unwavering, spoke louder than any speech. She was not building a legacy for herself, but for the people who like her. Mother had been told their dreams were too small. The executives who had once laughed at her would carry the memory of that conference room, a lesson in the peril of underestimating the quiet ones. Blake Harrington, stripped of his role, faded into the background, his name a cautionary tale in boardrooms across the city. But for Emma, the victory was not in his fall, nor in the headlines that began to whisper her name. It was in the small, unspoken moments, the pride in a server's eyes, the relief in a chef's voice, the knowledge that she had honored her mother's sacrifices. As the city spun on its lights blazing against the night, Emma stood at the edge of Casa Lumiere's flagship restaurant, watching the diners laugh and clink glasses. The room was alive with possibility, a testament to what could be built when dignity was the cornerstone. She thought of her mother still in Pennsylvania, still working her shifts, and felt a quiet ache in her chest. This was for her, for every person who had been dismissed, for every dream that had been deferred. True leadership, Emma knew, did not ask for the spotlight. It earned it one silent act of dignity, at a time forging a path where others could rise. And as she stepped into the night, the city stretching vast and vibrant before her, Emma carried the certainty that she was only beginning, her heart steady, with the promise of all she would yet build. Emma Collins reshaped the world's understanding of power, proving it doesn't always demand a tailored suit or command the room with a booming voice. Sometimes it moves softly in white sneakers, listens with quiet intensity, and enters carrying a tray of coffee only to depart owning the company. Her journey transcends a mere business triumph. It's a testament to dignity, restraint, and the fierce reclamation of a narrative long denied. Her story stirs the soul, inviting reflection. Have you ever been underestimated because of your appearance or role? Share your experience below. We cherish every voice. If Emma's tale resonates, subscribe to Sir Alex. Stories for more inspiring narratives.